And Nigeria in particular will spend more time on academics, reading and writing, rather than skills. As the society change, the education systems should change to switch from the normal academics to skills. I've always had this opinion and said this daily that we should adopt skills acquisition in our education system.
Welcome to Conversations Over Coffee, where we sit down with thought leaders, analysts, and experts to break down the key issues shaping our world over a great cup of coffee. I'm your host, Divine Alex, and today we are diving into the political shift across Africa and their impact on governance, economic development, and sustainability. Joining me today is an expert, Uzo Ben, who is an expert in politics and governance analyst. Uzo Ben, welcome to the conversation.
You're welcome.
Before we dive into the serious stuff, let's talk about you for a moment, right? Now, how did you become a political analyst, and how has the journey been for you?
Okay, since birth, or after birth, let me say that, I've had strong interest in politics, governance, and social development. I study political science, and by virtue of that, I have basic knowledge in politics, governance. So ever since then, I engage in political activities and political analysis. Thank you.
Okay, so you analyze politics, policies, and governance daily, but let's switch things up a little bit. So when you are not dissecting political trends, how do you even unwind? Like, do you have any favorite books, any hobbies, or guilty pleasures? I think we would like to know.
Yeah, my hobby is football. I think if I'm not a political analyst, I'll be a footballer. I have strong interest and love for football, for the game, for the soccer. I played football to the reasonable extent, and before I decide to, not really that I dropped, but I've dropped the ambition of becoming a professional footballer. But I love football, I still play the game.
Okay, so you would have been a footballer.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's get into the Africa's political landscape. Now, we've seen major political shifts. This is between military coups, contested elections, and increasing youth participation in governance. What do these changes tell us about Africa's democratic future? And do you see more stability or uncertainty ahead?
Yes, because Africa is moving with the nascent democracy. Using Nigeria as an example, since the last military coup, since we returned to the democracy in 1999, we have witnessed political stability in the area of transactions, power transactions. And in many of African countries have followed the trend until they recently in few countries in Africa. But I'm very sure that they will soon return to democracy. Democracy has come to stay, and democracy, I think, so far is the best system of government. And I see sustainability and development in Africa with continuous practicing democracy.
Many African governments are promising economic reforms, but implementation remains a challenge. It has remained a very, very big challenge to African countries. Now, what key policies do you think that African leaders should prioritize to drive economic growth while ensuring that there's a political stability?
Talking about the policy African leaders should drive to ensure economic growth and political sustainability. I think, in my opinion, I've always had this opinion, and I said one day I will write a book on it. Africa in education. The policy on education is really, really important. A shift in the education system we are practicing. Africa and Nigeria in particular will spend more time on academics, reading and writing, rather than skills. As the society change, the education systems should change to switch from the normal academics to skills. So I've always have this opinion. I've always have this opinion and say this daily that we should adopt skills acquisition in our education system. We spent, for instance, we spent 5 days, Monday to Friday, learning how to read, write, and all that stuff. We should inculcate skill acquisition. Maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as for academics, then Friday, Thursday, Friday for skills. From primary school, from primary. Because if you look at the world is changing. Globalization, civilization, skills. It will be a time that most of the things we read here is no longer needed globally. But skills acquisition, and looking at what is going on in Nigeria, people rely more on government jobs, and which is nowhere to be, white-collar jobs, which is nowhere to be found. Somebody spends 6 years in primary school, 6 years in secondary school, maybe 4 years in the university. That is more than 6, 12 plus 4 is about 18 years or thereabout, or 16 years. At the end of the day, wasted, or will I say wasted the 18 years, apart from the knowledge, nothing. But when you have skills along the line in the same year, when you graduate, you service, then you start up on yourself. I've always advocate that 1 year you service should be converted to 1 year compulsory skill acquisition, whereby you at the end of the year, government give you stipend to start up instead of all these academic activities. We should switch to skills, and that policy is very, very important. I always advise government within my capacity that they should change. I think some states are adopting it now. They should switch to skill acquisition, where they teach children how to do things with their hands.
Now, one of the biggest global concerns today is sustainable development. We often talk about economic growth, but how it's achieved is just as important, but unfortunately, we don't even talk about it more, right? So I want to ask you as a political analyst, how can African governments balance industrialization and economic expansion with environmental sustainability?
One of the problems of Africa is sustainability, like you said. We have developments that are unsustainable. I think it boils down to government policies. Government start projects, the successive government will abandon them. I think there should be a uniformity, where maybe a law, it should be a legislation, where the new government will not start a new project unless the old ones are completed. And the new government, every project will have a completion date, a legislation, mandatory. So it should be like that, because the sustainability is the basic problem we have in Africa, where you start a project, you won't end it, and it affects our economy. It affects our economy in a large. So I think there should be a legislation for continuation or continuity.
And speaking of sustainability, Africa is rich in natural resources, yet environmental degradation and climate change are major threats. So I'm asking you as a political analyst, what role should policymakers play in ensuring that Africa's natural resources are managed sustainably for future generations?
Diversification. We have natural resources, but what the problem we have in Africa is we concentrated more on oil and abandon other resources. There should be diversification to properly harness other resources. Then, I think another problem we have, I have to be honest, another problem we do have with these natural resources is community engagement. Communities where those resources are located always agitate. And the sharing formula. If you have adequate sharing formula where the interests of the communities are accommodated, we will harness these natural resources amicably and for the benefit of the nation. But when we have situation where communities are neglected, you start having some people mining or harnessing those resources behind government, and becomes a security threat and environmental threat anyway, because government will harness it in such a way that it will accommodate environmental problems. But those people are not trained. They just go there with the purpose of making profit, not accommodating the environment. So they mess the whole thing up and the society suffers.
Now, you mentioned something about sharing formula. If you were to propose, what type of sharing formula would you propose that we look into?
We have, every government of a country has their sharing formula. In Nigeria, we already have a sharing formula, which the federal government passed recently, the economic tax bill. I think they should start implementation.
Okay. Finally, let's talk about the people, citizens, right? Businesses and the private sector. You mentioned something about community engagement that I'm aware of. Now, I want to get your view on this. Like, how do you think African citizens and businesses should actively contribute to both good governance and sustainable development?
The government and business work in pari passu. There is no government without business, because business pay tax. It's through business the government generates tax. So if the business is dead, the government will have no money to work. So business and government, they are two essential parts of the society. So the need of the government, the social amenities, the provision of an enabling playing ground for business to thrive should be a primary responsibility of government apart from security. So when those things are in place, the business will thrive. And making policies that will not hinder, especially in taxation, that will not hinder the progress of government or sustainability of economy. So I think everything boils down to governance. The government should make laws that will favor economic growth and economic development.
Okay.
Yeah.
This has been such an insightful conversation. Analyst Uzoben, thank you for sharing your expertise over coffee.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and that's it for today's episode of Conversations Over Coffee. The political landscape is changing, and sustainability is no longer an option, it's a necessity. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow us, share your thoughts, and tell us, what do you think Africa needs most right now? I am Divine Alex, and I'll see you next time for another great conversation over coffee. Bye for now.